I'd like to see if Senator Hodges would be willing to open us up in prayer. It won't come on. Do you have to push your button, or is your... There. Okay, there you go. Thank you.
If you would, bow your heads, please. Dear Heavenly Father, thank you for all the many blessings you've bestowed upon us, Lord, particularly this beautiful day that we have. Thank you for allowing us to be here today, tending to the business of the people of Georgia. Lead us and guide us in all we do, and grant us the wisdom we need to make the proper decisions. These things we ask in Christ's name, amen.
Thank you, Senator Hodges. Okay, this is going to be the run of show today. We have 4 bills on the agenda: House Bill 182, House Bill 410, House Bill 422, and Senate Bill 267 if the sponsor comes. House Bill 422, we're going to have a hearing only. I think there's some suggested minor changes that we don't have yet on that one, so we'll Representative McCollum will let you explain your bill, and then in the future meeting we can just go over the changes, and then we'll be able to take action on it pretty quickly. We have 3 weeks left, as you all know, in the session, maybe not even 3 weeks. I've got a meeting scheduled for Thursday. I think we'll have 3 bills on the agenda Thursday. Tuesday of next week is the Senate will be working on the budget, and I have my Senate Appropriations Subcommittee meeting at 2 on Tuesday of next week, and it usually lasts about an hour and a half, so I'm going to cancel the Tuesday meeting of insurance next week, and we'll pick back up on Thursday of next week. Unfortunately, that Thursday meeting I think is at 4 o'clock, but we're going to try to do, we're going to just have to grind through it, and we have a lot of bills in the committee. But just to give you all kind of a heads up there. So we're going to start with Chairman Lumsden, my counterpart in the House, and he's bringing us House Bill 182. And Chairman, the version that I have is LC 520667. Is that what you have?
That is correct.
This bill, I think, will be familiar to the committee, Mr. Chairman. Very, very similar bill was passed out and actually has passed the Senate. It was carried by Senator Harbison. But would like to hear from you, sir.
All right. Well, thank you, sir.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Speaker, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, this is a Department of Insurance bill that deals with group life insurance as it pertains to members of the armed forces. This is House Bill 182, the LC number, as you mentioned. And as you're well aware, every life insurance policy contains exclusions. An exclusion is a defined cause of death that is not covered by the terms of the policy and is clearly stated in the language of the policy. In most policies, the term act of war is most often used to describe this exclusion. However, in a group life insurance policy, the term active duty is used. Now, a person can be on active duty and not be in a war zone. In fact, only about 5% of our military actually see combat. So the purpose and the language of this bill is just to make it clear that simply being on active duty in and of itself is not a valid reason to deny a claim. That's the bill in its entirety. I'll be glad to answer any questions.
We do have a question, Senator Hodges.
I had a question, and I thought about it after we passed the other bill. But if somebody's on active duty, I know a lot of policies will say that they don't cover, I know a lot of casualty policies will say they don't cover damage during a riot, R-I-O-T. And I know that sometimes life policies say the same thing. If somebody's on active duty and, the guard's called out or something like that, and they're, die from something that happens in a riot, what happens here?
Well, the exclusion of riot, as you've mentioned, is often stated in a particular policy. This bill addresses group life insurance policies. So just the term using active duty, rather broad, and doesn't really get to the heart of the issues. If you're jumping out of a plane, it's excluded. If you're scuba diving, maybe, if you're rappelling. It's more to do with the action that you are actually participating in as opposed to just being on active duty. I have Bryce Rawson with me from the insurance department that might be able to expand on that a little bit.
Of course, and thank you for the question, sir. What this bill does is
Bryce, introduce yourself.
sorry, I apologize. Bryce Rawson, Director of Legislative Affairs with the Georgia Insurance Commissioner's Office.
Thank you, Bryce.
Of course. And so the intent of this bill and what this language does is if you are active duty right now in Georgia, based on exclusion that these insurance policies can have, simply because you are active duty, means you can be excluded. So right now, if you are active duty military, but you are on military leave, at home, if you're just, driving to the grocery store and you get into an accident, which is where this bill came from, you would not be covered just because you were technically active duty. And so if you are just doing any normal business that any person would do, if you are just jogging, then you would be covered even if you're active duty military. So to Chairman Limson's point, there are policy exclusions that are specific, with regards to the rights, so that he is correct in that point.
So I'll draw y'all's attention to lines 18 through 25. So those are acceptable exclusions in the code that a policy can exclude those things. So when Chairman Lumpson talked about jumping out of an airplane, that's a hazardous occupation. That's okay to exclude that. And then the, hazard of war is okay to exclude if you're in a war zone. And the reason why act of war is excluded is, if you can imagine, an insurance company couldn't reserve enough for that. When you have thousands or maybe hundreds of thousands killed, you can't reserve enough to cover that.
And there's specific coverage for that.
Yeah, so, what we're saying here is that just because you're active duty military, that should not be an acceptable
In and of itself, should not.
exclusion in and of itself. All right? You want to make a motion, or you want to?
I wanted to ask a question first, and then I'm happy to make the motion.
Okay.
And this is probably deja vu all over again from the other bill about the reserves. And just clearing up, when you're in the reserves, you're not always deployed. So how does that work in this bill? We answered it on the other bill, but I've forgotten what the answer was.
I think it's line 40, maybe.
Yeah, it's line 40.
Yeah, on the Senate Bill 109, which is this counterpart, line 40, the change, what they struck active duty and just said if the insured is a service member, that was what encapsulated that change in Senate Bill 109.
Got it? Okay. It's your prerogative. I would accept that as an amendment at the appropriate time. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Chairman. Bryce, I'm just reading over this. The dependency indemnity compensation for death in wartime is a tax-free payment of $100,000. Separate from this, obviously, but how often has this occurred in Georgia where a family of active duty personnel has been KIA and doesn't receive benefit where it's been denied?
I think that goes to the issue of a lot of insurance in itself. A lot of consumers of insurance, what they'll do is they'll take just the word of the insurance company that this is denied, and they won't seek anything further. So truthfully, we don't know how often this happens, and that's what's worrisome. We don't know how many folks that this potentially could affect, because you got to think, all of the folks who may have their spouses under that have coverage. So how many state troopers, if they, happen to get activated, would this potentially affect? So we don't know how many folks this does affect, but for each individual that does affect, it is a very severe effect.
Okay, thanks. Chairman, did any
But
additional?
we're talking group life here as opposed to a personal
Individual.
policy that you might carry.
Understood.
So that was, and as I said, the whole purpose of, I know there's many questions we can get into, but the whole purpose of the policy is just to make sure that we understand that just being on active duty in and of itself is not
Exclusion.
not an exclusion.
Just making sure we covered everything on that. Thank you, Chairman.
Okay, I don't see any other questions. What's the will of the committee? Got a motion to pass, Senator Cowser, second, Senator Hodges. Any further discussion or amendments? Yes.
If we wanted to be consistent with what we worked on before, we would change in 2 different places on line 3. Instead of an active duty service member, it would read a service member. And the same thing on line 40. It would read is a service member. I think that's what we did before. Is that correct, Bryce?
That's correct.
So I'd like to offer that amendment.
Okay, we got an amendment offered to strike and active duty on line 3 and change it to A. And then
A service.
strike on line 40 and active duty and change it to, and replace it with A. Do I have a second? Got a second. All in favor of the amendment signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, like sign. All right, it's amended. Now we will act on the motion to do pass for committee substitute of LC 520667. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, like sign. All right, committee sub for LC 520667 has passed. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir.
It will now be eligible for rules. Next, we will hear from Chairman Buddy DeLoach, longtime friend of mine and my family. Actually took me red fishing, and I guess he didn't think I was much good at it. He never took me back, but I want.
They say I redfish a challenge, so we didn't want to overfish it, Mr. Chairman.
We want to do that again, and what island was Barrier Island? Was that? It's had the lemurs.
St. Catherine.
Yeah.
St. Catherine.
That
That's
was
a privately owned island owned by the Nobles Foundation. That's the
Incredibly
lifesaver
special
folks.
trip. So they have lemurs on St. Catherine's.
They do.
They kind of look like monkeys, but they're not. But it's amazing.
That's right.
anyway.
And it was great to have children there with us. House Bill 410 is an insurance department bill, and it is truly a cleanup bill. You'll notice throughout where we strike a word here and there, and we correct some spelling. And for instance, the term vice president, code has it hyphenated, and most of y'all know that's not correct. Where it refers to the insurance commissioner as he. We pass this bill, it'll now read he or she. Couple of things that it does do. Currently for foreign insurance companies, and I'm sure most of y'all know what that is, but just to make it clear, a foreign insurance company is a company chartered somewhere other than the state of Georgia, but licensed to do business in the state of Georgia. The state now requires a small deposit from them. This bill would eliminate that if their home insurance department requires a deposit that we deem sufficient to protect our policyholders in Georgia. In this paperless world, the department, of course, has a web page. They have a registry that they send notices to, and this would eliminate the need for that written notice in triplicate. Most of what you see lined out refers to that newspaper requirement. It would eliminate the requirement for a separate license for each branch insurance agency. That really makes sense because having a license for each one of those branches did not accomplish anything. And finally, something that will make every agent in the state happy, we're going to 2-year license renewals. And the renewal date will be set from the time you were originally licensed, and that spreads the workload out over a period of time and helps the department. And that is the bill, Mr. Chairman and members.
That's a great bill. Thank you. Just on the agency licensing, the fee remains the same. It's a 2-year license, so you're paying for 2 years up front, which
That's
is
correct.
fair and good.
That's
It's not
correct.
it's not cutting the license fee in half.
That's right.
Didn't want anybody to think that.
We rarely see those reductions, Mr. Chairman.
Any questions for the author? All right, do I have a motion?
Mr. Chair, move to pass on House Bill 410, LC 529,000.
Thank you, and thank you for the LC number. Second, Senator Cowsert. Any discussion or amendments? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed, like sign.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's a
Thank
pleasure
you.
to be with your committee today.
Good luck in
Do,
rules.
do I need anything signed to go to rules, or you take care of that?
We have an elaborate set of forms and homage you have to pay and go get hazed and all that, but
Does that kind of track what we do on the House side?
we don't have forms, do we? I don't think there are any forms.
Thank you very, thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. So I'm glad Senator Estevez came because we want to hear from you, Senator Estevez, your bill. But I think I wanted you also here to hear Representative McCollum's bill because they're in the same subject matter and are getting at sort of the same thing. And I know you've brought this issue to us before, and I think it's got a lot of merit. So I wanted to hear Representative McCollum's bill, and then you can tell us about your bill too, if you don't mind. So Representative McCollum, come forward, and it's LC 550485. We're going to do a hearing only because there's been some last minute suggested changes that the author's good with, and it makes sense to me, but we don't have the actual substitute with us yet, and I hadn't had time to really go through that. So I'm not trying to give you a hard time or the runaround like we normally get on the House side.
Not from me, because I'm not a chairman, but
All right, tell us what you're trying to do here.
thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. So this bill, like you alluded to, Senator Estevez brought it through the House and in the Senate last year, and the governor decided to veto it. I think there was a little bit of some concerns on how to implement it, so we've kind of changed the bill up a little bit. So this bill, essentially, what it does, this allows covered employees enrolled in the high deductible plan that the state now offers to make pre-tax contributions to the health savings account through a salary deduction. It also authorizes the state to facilitate these deductions from the employees pre-taxed. And so that's pretty much the bill. I'll stand for questions. Now the sub, we don't have, the department had sent the sub over about 1:30 today. Essentially what the sub is saying in the bill, it also says that we have to offer 2 high deductible plans. Right now we have United. So the department was concerned about offering the 2 plans because they'll have to do a procurement. So essentially what we changed in the bill is we will, if we get the bill across the finish line, the United Healthcare will be go into effect on January the 1st of 2026. And then the second plan will go into effect in 2029 after the procurement that we already are up for at this time. And I also have the department here that can kind of explain a little bit of that if there's questions about that. So, but I'll stand for questions now if anybody has any questions.
So I like the idea what you're getting at here, and I've been on a high deductible health plan for probably 25 years at least, and there's some tax advantages for the policyholder to do that, and theoretically a reduced health care premium because you're taking on more of the risk yourself essentially, but you get a deduction on your federal income tax for the contributions to the plan, and it's a cap of how much you can put in every year, but the deduction is triggered by the contribution, and you can use the money. It's not a use it or lose it situation, so you can roll it over from year to year, and it's a good way to accumulate some funds for unexpected health care expenses with a little bit of a tax. The federal government's helping subsidize that, and I guess the state too.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and to your point, so when you turn 65, you can actually it turns into a 401k. So you can actually have a totally separate vehicle that you can use at 65. But to your question, or to your summary there, say for instance, it's going to save the state a substantial amount of money because the more employees we have, if you figure this FICA tax, I had a fiscal note prepared. It's a little bit off on the front, but as far as the savings to the state, a family can take out $8,550 a year, $8,500 a year. Well, the savings is the 7.65 that we have that the state doesn't have to pay. So it's a savings to the state of the 7.65, and it's a savings to the employee. So if you figure, if we have now, we roughly have, well, there's 10,000 people enrolled, but some of those are part of the school system. But as of now, just say, for instance, for rough numbers, if we have 5,000 people enrolled in the plan, that savings to the state at $8,550, which would be $3 million a year. So as we grow this plan, that's why we wanted to have two different plans that people can choose from. But as we grow this plan, if you think about 500,000, 500,000 people, isn't that correct? How many we have on the health plan now in the state? Roughly 500,000. 500,000. Right. So 500,000 people. If we get, say, 100,000, you can do the math on if they're doing even 4,300. That's a huge savings to the state. So it's kind of a no-brainer for the state to implement this. And some of the problems with the bill last time was facilitation. I think the department had a hard time facilitating it, and I can let them speak to it. But I think we've drafted the bill in a way that they feel like they can do it this time.
It also gives the healthcare consumers some skin in the game to make, the theory is you would make more cost-effective or prudent choices with where you spend your healthcare dollars, instead of just having a third party pay for everything.
Right.
So I like it. Do we want to hear from the department maybe now? And
Yeah, come on up.
Mind if I grab another chair?
no, I don't mind. Just speaking to the microphone, so if anybody's
All right,
bored enough to
certainly.
be watching this online.
I'm Brandy Sylvan, Director of Government Relations with the Department of Community Health. And joining me today is
I'm Louis Amos, Executive Director for the State Health Benefit Plan.
so we definitely appreciate Representative McCollum working with us on this bill, and we definitely had some good conversation about where there are implementation challenges. As you referenced, Senator Estevez had a bill 2 years ago that received a veto, and it was due to challenges with implementation. And part of that is we kind of have a unique setup in Georgia in that DCH administers the health insurance benefit, but the Department of Administrative Services administers the other flexible benefits. So that caused a little bit of a challenge with making sure the data of who's enrolled in the high deductible plans could be transferred over to DOAS. And they had worked with their vendor to try to get a little bit of clarity on how we could work around this. But the other challenge is that DOAS does not have a relationship with the teachers, with the local school systems. They don't have it set up for that payroll deduction to take place. Excuse me. So this proposal is limiting the benefit to state employees. And we do have the relationship to be able to set up that deduction when it's limited to state employees.
Okay. Can I ask you some questions? So on the, do you know for sure when the procurement is gonna be?
Mr. Chair, the scheduled time frame is in the 27 year, in the next couple years to do the procurement for the insurance vendors. So that's the time frame to get that done. You know, that there is a little fluctuation, but it's probably in the year 2027 is the year, and we're looking at potentially a 28 or so effective date if we're going to add an additional vendor to provide high deductible services.
So wouldn't it make sense to implement this offering simultaneous with your RFP process?
And I
So
believe
that-
that is the intent, but I believe the January 1st, 2029 date was just meant to give us a little bit of cushion in case there's any challenges to the procurement. But the intent is that upon the next re-procurement, we would be requesting proposals for high deductible plans, and if we receive at least 2 that are cost neutral proposals, that we would offer at least 2.
So the way I visualize this working, and I think what Representative McCollum, I don't want to put words in his mouth, but what he's talking about in 2 plans is 2 different levels of deductible, essentially. Not necessarily that it would have to be 2 different carriers, but I could be wrong. I don't know what you're trying to get at. I'm assuming you're wanting like a $3,000 high deductible plan and a $6,000 high deductible plan possibly, or whatever or you wanting 2 different carriers to have it?
Well, to be honest, I would like to have 2 different carriers, and it's a different reason. You know, obviously United Healthcare is what we have now, and that's why I just left it in place, and it would take effect in 26. The problem with United Healthcare at this moment for the past 3 years is if you live in North Georgia, you can't use it because they can't come to agreement with the hospital up there. So the reason I wanted to have 2 plans, high deductible from 2 different or more, it says 2 or more, however the procurement wants to do it. So people do have an option to choose a plan that they can obviously use in their hometown. So that's kind of my intent. And, you know, the sub also says 2029 or before, so whenever the procurement goes into place, obviously. I just want it to be, like they said, be cost neutral and not cost the state any money on the procurement side. And obviously, you know, if we have a couple different plans, potentially the state could even save even more money from obviously the premium, because, you know, high deductible plans are usually cheaper. And the deductible obviously would help the employees if it was different, you know, different ones. You know, like now, I think the deductible we have at the state I have is $7,500, if I'm not mistaken. Isn't that correct?
It's it's $3,500 individual, and
Right.
it's set up to $7,500
Right.
for family.
So obviously, if we could get that down, but you know, as you build your health savings account, you know, obviously that would be beneficial to you. You know, and a lot of companies, the companies I have before, they actually put in seed money. They actually save so much money. They put in $1,500 a year, which that's not what I'm asking for now. But that just shows you how much these huge companies are saving by giving people $1,500 in their health savings account. So it's a win-win for the state, either on the premium and the pre-taxed.
Okay, we have a question, Senator Kirkpatrick.
Yeah, I just, we don't have the sub, but I'm a little concerned about putting a date certain in the bill to begin with. Just having watched the re-procurement process that went on with Medicaid, and I wonder if it'd be better to leave it a little vague with upon re-procurement or something like that, because we know there'll be challenges and all that, and that's made the timeline much longer than anticipated for the Medicaid re-procurement. That's my concern.
We had that in the language, but the Ledge Council had a little bit of concern, so I had reached out to Commissioner Russell, and they felt like that 29 would definitely be doable, because 27's the date. Then if it gets legally challenged, go ahead, I'll let you answer.
We had suggested the language upon re-procurement for that very reason. And, you know, Legislative Council advised that it might be better to put a specific date in there, and we feel that January 1st, 2029 is enough cushion to account for any legal challenges we may face.
All right, so this was a hearing only. Thank you very much. I am not gonna entertain a sub unless I have it at least 24 hours prior to the meeting, so
Okay.
y'all get me your recommended language on
Okay.
the sub
All right, great.
when you can, and we'll get you slotted back in. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate y'all's time.
Senator Estevez. I hope you don't mind me having you here. It wasn't to have you sit there and listen to the fact that your bill was vetoed several times. I guess I wanted to give you a kudos, because this was a great idea, and I applaud you for bringing it forward, and just wanted to hear from you about your bill and anything you'd like to say.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mr. Chairman, and I appreciate my colleague in the House bringing his bill. I think it's an important one. I've always heard that the House takes all of our great ideas, but I'm kidding. But look,
No, it's true.
Here's the bottom line for me, is that I have a few fundamental beliefs that I think that are encompassed in my bill, and I think his bill would do the same, which is that ultimately the state legislature should not be making these decisions. The fact that benefits and potential savings for the state are being held up because we need legislative language is unfortunate. And I think that state government should be nimble, especially when it comes to state employee benefits, something HSAs have been around for decades. And the fact that we need to update it in code is unfortunate. The priority for me in bringing this bill a couple years ago was not only to provide taxpayers with savings, and as the representative pointed out, there are significant savings for the state here, but it's also a huge benefit for our state employees. So my goal in all of this is to push the state's agencies to do what it can to implement this as quick as possible. My legislation is permissive in that it authorizes the council to offer HSAs on a pre-tax basis, but it also does set a deadline. I will point out that, as the chairwoman pointed out, state procurements tend to shift a bit. And my only concern is that when you talk about the savings that the representative talked about, whether it's $3 million or I had it pegged for 100 state employees, if they each save $2,000, that would save the state $15,000. And as he mentioned, there are a lot of state employees who are eligible to use these plans. These savings would come in the hundreds of thousands, if not $1 million or more. And to delay those kinds of savings for 5 to 6 years is concerning me, especially with all the priorities that we have when it comes to funding in the state. So I would just encourage us to move as swiftly as we can so that we can redirect those savings to providing services to our constituents.
Senator, speak to the public school teachers issue that was brought up.
Yeah, so the state helps facilitate the offering of the state health benefit plan by allowing school districts to opt in, is my understanding. So part of the idea behind my bill was to allow those school systems to, just like they opt into using the state health benefit plan. I'm not sure whether it's an opt-in or mandatory, but they use it. That the same thing would be with the HSA, that they would be able to, on a pre-tax basis, use HSAs, because that savings is not only for the employee, the teacher, but it's also for the school system. It would save the school system dollars. So I would like to find a way to ensure that these benefits are being passed on to school systems, so that we don't have a situation where we have folks on the same state health benefit plan, but a state employee has a pre-tax HSA and a school employee has a post-tax HSA, because the post-tax HSA is the issue here. That doesn't save anyone money, and employees have to proactively try to get that refund back at the end of the year versus seeing the benefit at the front end. So I would just want to make sure that if it's only to state employees and it's excluding school teachers, that we do what we can to ensure that if those school systems are using the same system, that they are able to see the same kind of benefits that a state employee would see.
So I'm probably going to call DCH back up, if you don't mind. I think the reason, a big reason I suspect that the school districts use the state health benefit plan is because the state funds a lot of that cost. And so we're partners with the school districts on that. I guess I'm like with you, Senator Estevez, that I don't really understand the problem with the school districts doing the payroll deduction. I mean, that every other industry does that. I don't get it. I don't see what the problem is.
Yes, sir, Mr. Chair. The concern was that there are probably over about 800 or so payroll locations, because the school systems either have certain systems or they have their own in-house payroll processing. And in essence, what will have to happen, we spoke with the current vendor, and that we could potentially do it through a employer portal, where they will have to, each individual locations would have to go on and be responsible for those deductions and be able to do it from that standpoint. I think part of the issue is that the previous bill had the Department of Administrative Services administering it, and they could not, their vendor had issues and concerns about being able to administer it. So the difference here is that with state employees, obviously through state accounting offices, there's one payroll system that could potentially administer the plan. But when you get into those 800 separate payroll locations, that's where you come into the concern. But it is a process that can be done, but it is a very, very, as you can imagine, a heavy administrative process.
So why would the state feel like we're obligated? I mean, we don't run their payroll now.
Right.
I mean, I don't know why they couldn't just handle that locally. I mean, school districts already offer ancillary benefits that are voluntary, like maybe an Aflac product that doesn't have anything to do with DOAS or the state, and we're not putting any state dollars in it. They're having to deduct that premium from the paycheck of the teacher or the employee. Why would this not, how would this be any different? It just seems like it'd be on them to figure that out.
Yeah, it's definitely, it will be on the school systems to be able to set up the administrative process with the HSA bank administrator. And that was, I think, some of the issues that, various different school systems they have various different systems, and being able to, from a time perspective, being able to administer that and to put that into play. Well, it will be, offered in a.
So if we're talking about putting a effective date pretty far out into the future, they would have plenty of time to get their act together and do this.
Clearly, in terms of the other option is that the selective vendor, we can work with them in terms of setting up a system that they can assist us in getting these payroll systems enrolled.
I mean, why would y'all even need to be involved in that?
Yeah, exactly, sir.
So we might look at that.
Yes, sir.
I'd love to see it opened up to school teachers and school employees too.
Yeah, so under the
I
current
mean,
system.
you're just offering the plan.
Right,
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 it's
right.
the option, right?
Right,
That's what.
So let me say, under the current system,
I don't want to get it vetoed again.
yeah. So under the current system, there are a couple ways in which, employees can, in fact, go directly with Optum Bank HSA to do an HSA account. And out of the 200 or so accounts that are currently in place, 100 of them are actively having contributions. Now, a few of them do have the ability, the school system, the payrolls have been able to do a pre-tax deduction. But on the same token, there are a number of them that are still doing post-tax. So the ability is there. It's, as you can imagine, working with the school systems and working with the employees to be able to get that done in a pre-tax fashion.
Okay, well, my understanding of it, and I don't want to belabor this, but I guess I am. You don't even have to use Optum Bank. You can use any qualified HSA bank you want to use. I
Yeah.
mean,
As long as you have a high deductible health plan.
so I don't see why DOAS or DCH would even be involved
Right.
with the school district's decisions on how to administer this, but that's my simple view. Yes.
And if DOAS were involved with local school boards in this, would it necessitate local school boards changing their banking relationships?
They would, the payroll relationship. So DOAS only have approximately 10 or so school systems that are doing benefit administration through them. So, of the 159 other counties, all the other affiliates would have to, basically, if you want DOAS to administer, it would have to go through that process.
So if we required this, then all of those local school systems would have to change their payroll account?
No, sir. No, sir. So what we're saying is that we can work with them to work with the bank administrator for the health savings account plan. So they can,
Okay.
in fact, set
So
up.
you wouldn't be interrupting any local
Ex- ex- ex-
relationships?
Exactly.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions? This has been educational for me. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.
Any other business to come before the committee? This is a hearing only. All right. No other business. I will adjourn the meeting. Thank you very much. See y'all Thursday.